Okay, so I'd like to call the meeting
Thank
to
you.
order. Does the clerk want to take roll?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Du Bois,
I am here.
Councilmember Niss,
Here.
Chair Tanaka.
Here.
3 present.
Okay, City Clerk, are there any oral communications?
I do not see any speakers at this time.
Okay, let's close oral communications and move to the first action item. The adoption of a resolution amending utility rate schedule D1, storm and surface water drainage, increasing the stormwater management fee by 2.5% to $15.04 per month per equivalent residential unit for fiscal year 2021. Does staff want to make a few comments before we start our deliberation?
Yes, this is Phil Boble, Assistant Director, Public Works for Environmental Services, which handles the management of the stormwater management program in the city. It's different groups are doing different pieces of it, but the Environmental Services group does the financial management of it and the overall management. So just to repeat what Greg has said, the bottom line is that the suggested recommendation is that the Finance Committee recommend to the full council the adoption of the resolution that's attached to the staff report. And that resolution would increase the fee for a typical resident. Well, it increases it by 2.5% for everybody, and that results in the typical fee for a resident going up to $15.04, as Greg said. Just to remind everybody, the stormwater management function is to maintain and improve the system that takes runoff from our parking lots, streets, yards, any rainfall, collects it and takes it through a series of points to our creeks where it flows on to the bay. It isn't treated. It doesn't go through the sewage treatment plant, as I know you all know, but that's still a point of confusion for some of our residents. So we have one part of the program is an outreach and pollution prevention program, since that water isn't treated. Another aspect of the program, larger, is the maintaining these pipelines. And then the third major part of it is the capital improvement program, where we actually improve the system, increase the size of certain pipes, repair and replace pipes that have failed. And then another big piece of the capital improvement program is our pump stations, maintaining them, rebuilding them. And typically, they've been a large part of our capital improvement program over the last years. So the fee increase is to account for inflation in all of these areas. And the ballot measure, which was approved in 2017 by our residents, well, really not so much just residents, but the property owners. So both commercial and institutional and residential property owners got to vote. And what they approved was to handle this inflation was to either increase the budget, allow city council to increase the budget by either 6% or the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, each year, whichever is lower. And it's always been the case since we started this that the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, has been below 6%. So it's limited council's ability to increase the storm drain fee by more than CPI. Well, this year, the CPI is 2.5%. So that's why the recommendation for you in front of you is the 2.5% increase to account for inflation. It actually doesn't completely account for the type of inflation that we have. As you know, various costs that the city has increased by more than 2.5. So we have sort of a slight disconnect there, but we can discuss that if you want to. And that's really, I think, the upshot of the presentation is to tell you, remind you what this program is and how we got to this 2.5 proposed increase. So I think I'll just stop there and see if there are questions about any of this.
City Clerk, are there any members of the public that wish to speak on this item?
I do not see anyone wishing to speak.
Okay, then I'm going to close public comment for this item, and let's go to my fellow committee members to see if you guys have any questions, thoughts, suggestions, motions. So there's only 3 of us here, so it's easy. You guys, I think both raised your hand. I didn't catch who raised your hand first, so who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Liz. You're muted, Liz. There you
Am I muted or unmuted?
No, we can hear you.
Good. So Phil, I know this has been going on for a long time. You have a good committee who's been working on this as well. Tell me, do we have another city that we look to for any interesting ideas or precedent or anything like that?
Well, we're well connected to the cities in our county. There's a monthly meeting of representatives from the cities that attend, or well, now virtually attend. So we have that method. There's also a group that is for the Bay Area, and we're also active in that group. So I think we're pretty well connected with what the other cities are up to. Now we are, not completely, but we are kind of special, not quite unique, but there aren't so many cities that have a storm drain fee. And so if you're talking about the fee aspect of this, there's a smaller subset that are using a fee to generate the revenue for this. Everybody has to take care of their storm drain lines. Most, frankly, probably don't do as good a job as we do in Palo Alto, if I can just cut to the chase. But they use either general fund money or some other funding that they've cobbled together for this purpose.
So, and also, I don't know how long the committee's been meeting, but the committee's been meeting for quite a while. I've gone to some of their meetings. So there's a lot of public participation, meaning that they're also, I'm going to guess, is if anyone wishes to complain about it, they could talk to one of the committee as well as to you. But it has seemed to me to be a pretty successful operation, one that is very important to how that water gets to the bay. And I think you still have markings around the, whatever we call the street drains.
Yeah, inlets.
And what is it that it says on it?
No dumping flows to bay is what most of them say.
Right. Which I think is a valuable sign to have so that people aren't putting something else in there.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so thank you for that. Thanks for all your good work. Take it off.
Thank you.
Take it to Tom.
Thanks, Liz. So I just want to pick up where you left off, which was, so how much are we falling behind in terms of actual costs versus what
Well,
we're able to charge?
in recent years, as you know, the construction costs, the bids that we get are often substantially more than what our engineer's estimate was. Part of that is just that there's a lag time between our engineer's estimate and the bidding. So I don't attribute all that to inflation exactly, but those costs can be 10% higher than what we anticipated. That's the most, that's the largest type of that increase that we see. But benefits for a while and even now are really going up more than employee benefits and salary benefits are really going up more than that percentage these days as well.
Okay. So, I'll go ahead and move the staff motion. I think again,
Well, why don't I second it?
okay. Yeah, I think it makes sense. We've had a ballot measure on this, and Again, what's not even at cost recovery. It sounds like we're still, so how do we pay the difference, Bill?
Well, what we have to do is let our, we save money wherever we can, either on the maintenance side, the pollution prevention side, but most of it has to come as a shortfall in the CIP. That's the biggest chunk of this thing. And it's where we have some discretion. We can delay projects. We can use value engineering or some other ways to try to keep them down. And this is sort of our only alternative. Between the two ballot, we've had two ballot measures. The new one started in 2017. So one thing we did in or near 2017 was to push out one of those projects, part of one of them, to the current ballot measure. We went ahead with the Matadero Creek pump station improvements, but we didn't improve the main line going into it. We pushed that off to this budget. So we may have to do something like that again.
Yeah. And, you know, we went through some droughts, but these are critical cases of flooding. And so I think we should support the staff motion here.
Can the city clerk put the motion on the screen, or are we going to do it? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so Tom, did you want to speak more to your motion, or you're
No,
done?
I think I just did.
Okay, Liz, do you want to speak to your second?
I think we have thoroughly examined this one.
Okay. Okay. So, Tom, do you have any other comments?
No.
Okay. So, I do have a few questions and comments here. So, I think, as everyone knows, we're going through very, very difficult economic times, not just as a city, but everyone, right? There's record layoffs. I think the last time was 22 million unemployed, something that's starting to approach a Great Depression. And a lot of people I know are out of work, hurting big time. A lot of businesses are closing down. So now this is a relatively minor increase. It's 2.5%, so not a probably not going to kill anyone, but it's I do think about the optics in terms of because I think in general when times are tough, it's important that government acts as a buffer to try to help people when times are tough, and when times are good, then I think in general we try to build up our reserves so we can weather storms like this. So that's just kind of a general thought I have and general principle. So so I think the city manager spoke in previous sessions that there would be no increase. So I was thinking that while this is a very small amount, I was a little bit surprised to see that this was still there. I realized the other one doesn't have it, but this one does. So, and I guess, Phil, as you talked about kind of the need here, how big is the delta in terms of exact dollar amount? Is it from what we charge to what the cost is right now? Do you know?
You mean how much would this amount to, this total? How much revenue would we get from this 2.5 increase?
Report. So I know that.
Okay.
I guess what I'm asking is, what is the because you talked about how construction costs and the salaries and benefits and pensions, all that stuff is going a lot faster than the CPI, right? And we know that, right? We know that that all is happening. So how much further ahead are our costs now for the stormwater versus what we bring in and what we charge? I don't know if you know it, like on this kind of number, like, so it's costing us X number of dollars, per bill.
Yeah, I'd have to get back to you on that, Councilmember Tanaka, and we could get back to you on that. Tom was sort of asking the same type of thing, and what I said in response to him was, well, sometimes these bids come in at 10% over. That's an example from construction. And on the salary side, we know that the true costs of salary and benefits is going up even over 4%, not the 2.5. But to actually come out to give you we'd have to crunch the numbers and get back to you on the exact amount.
I think that's actually an important number to know in terms of how much, like if it's, as an example, costing us $20 and we're charging $15, that's one thing, right? Or if it's costing us $10 but we're charging $15, that's another thing, right? So I think it would be good to know where are we, right? And I didn't see that in the staff report, but I think that would be really important to know.
I think the other thing Phil said on stormwater is we defer maintenance to make it balanced. I think the real question is how much deferred maintenance do we have, right?
That's actually a good question. So to what Tom just asked, do you know the answer, Phil?
Yeah, we could try to include that too. So the big factors are, like Tom was saying, maintenance that we'd be falling behind in, construction costs that would be going up, and then our salary benefits costs going up. So we can get back to you and try to answer that as a package.
Okay, that would be great. I appreciate it. Because in terms of construction cost, I think there's a lot of construction projects that are going to be canceled. And I know, like, during the 10-year plus bull run that we've been having, that construction costs have gone up every year, and it's just totally outpaced inflation. But I think the tide has turned, and it's going to flip around the other way. So we may find that the construction costs are much, much cheaper, and that it's actually a really great time to, although we don't have the money, it's a really great time to be doing a lot of construction projects probably, because the costs will be dramatically lower, and a lot of people are going to be looking for projects. So I want, I know for the past few years, people have been saying, oh yeah, every day we would delay construction costs, construction project, it's going up by X% per day or whatever. I think that tide has definitely turned, and we're going to see much lower costs.
Cool.
And that's my prediction. I might be totally wrong, but I'll be surprised if it's not that. Okay. Yeah, I guess the UAC looked at this, but it was looked at it kind of prior to all the COVID stuff, right?
Yeah, the last time that UAC talked about it was pre-COVID, as I recall.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, and I'll just let me ask the maker of the motion, Tom. Phil offered to kind of answer both of our questions, like how much does it cost per ratepayer, and what are the deferred maintenance? I'd like to actually see if we can make that part of the motion so that when it goes to council, they actually know what we're voting on. Would you accept that?
Are you good with that, Phil?
Sure.
Yeah.
Just one point to the committee. We do an average rate, average bill change in the proposed budget, which did assume the 2.5% increase in this. And based on that chart for stormwater, it's about a 37-cent increase.
Oh, no, I know the increased amount. I guess what we're asking is more about the two questions that were asked that Phil can't just, know on top of his head is one, per ratepayer, what is our cost right now, right? Is it
What
more
is our cost?
Yeah. What is it more than we charge or less than we charge, right? And Phil spoke about some things, but he doesn't know quantitatively what it is.
Understood.
And then the second thing, and this is a question from Tom, which is, well, what kind of deferred maintenance is there? And that would be good to know, right? Because, and I guess in particular to Tom's question, because we're not expert in stormwater drains, like what are critical, like if we don't do it, the storm drains are going to break, tomorrow type thing. And I don't think we let our stuff get to that point. And other stuff where, well, if we just delay 1 year, would that be okay? Because I know right now it's a very difficult economic time for a lot of people. And while this is a minor amount, every little bit helps. So I think when that comes to council, if that could be in the report, that would be awesome. And I think would really help us make a more informed decision.
we'll do the best we can. It's an area that is going to require assumptions, and but we'll do something.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Okay, I guess Councilmember Niss or Vice Mayor Du Bois, are there any other questions, comments on this thing?
I think we're ready to vote.
Okay, so let's take the vote. Let's go, I guess, Vice Mayor.
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Niss.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna vote no, and mainly because while I think this is a minor amount, I think there's some information I don't know yet, and also I think a lot of people in our city are hurting, and I think while this is minor, every little bit helps. So, okay, so I think we're done with this action item. Let's move to action item number 2. The staff have a presentation they want to go over.
Yes, I believe the utilities department has the next 2. And Lisa, are you going to start us off, or Dean?
Yes, my name
Want me to start?
is and I'm just, forgive me if I'm a little slow. Oh, Dean, please go ahead.
Tanaka and council members, tonight, Utilities has 2 items on the agenda, our rate managers and Jonathan Abendscheid, our Assistant Director of Resource Management. And then now I'll go ahead and I'll just turn it over to Lisa Belair, who is our Senior Resource Planner, that's going to walk us through this utility financial plan.
Thank you so much. Can you please let me know if you can see my screen? Can you see the slides at this
Yes.
point? Wonderful. So I'm going to start to tell you about the water utility financial plan. And this is a 0% rate increase for fiscal year 2021. This slide gives you an agenda for the item to go through, and I'm going to give you a little brief overview of the 4 different funds. And at the outset, I just wanted to mention that this financial forecast does not include the COVID-19 possible impacts. So in the Utility Advisory Commission earlier this month, we did present some information on COVID-19 possible impacts. So I know our assistant director is on the line. If you would like to hear those slides, the information on those slides, either now or as we get going, he's available to do that. Any feedback, or shall I just go ahead with the water?
Let's do this. Why don't you go ahead through your presentation? I would like to encourage my fellow council members to ask questions. So feel free to jump in and ask questions. It's a small group. Let's keep this interactive. And then, you know, if there are any members of the public that want to speak after this presentation, we should take their comments, and then we could deliberate on this item.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, this is a 0% rate increase for water for fiscal year 2021. And then we'll also talk about wastewater, and that is also 0% that we're coming forward with. Just to mention, electric and gas will be coming to you next month, and those do have small rate increases associated with them. The gas and water cost of service studies were completed in fiscal year 2019. And we are currently in the process of working on a cost of service study for the wastewater utility. This is the table that is in your packet of the rate increases for each utility. I'm going to actually skip ahead to a slide, an updated version that I prepared, because there's been a late change in the gas utility. So the gas utility proposal is 3%, and then you can see the wastewater and water are still at 0%, and this allows you to see the percentage rate changes going forward during the 5-year period. And this is the same information in a graph format, and you can see that the rate increase proposal for fiscal year 2021 is low, and the average increase for each year going forward is a little bit lower than the average for the past few years. So going back up to cost containment. So consistent with the utility's strategic plan, cost containment is being instituted as an ongoing priority. Now, there are several slides on cost containment here. These are primarily for your information, and any questions that you have, we would be happy to answer them. I am going to launch straight into the materials related to the water utility specifically. So for the water utility, about half of the costs are related to supply costs. So these are the costs of purchasing the water from San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. And about half of the costs are for the distribution system, maintenance and replacement and infrastructure. A lot of costs for CIP in the distribution system have been related to aging infrastructure. And that's something that has been seen also by the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission as they have been rolling out their water system improvement project. This is a series of capital projects that have been very expensive and have improved the seismic reliability of the water system. So Palo Alto has benefited greatly from that work. However, it has provided a lot of upward pressure on the rates, and it is going to continue to provide upward pressure on the rates going forward. On the distribution side, there are both operation and capital cost drivers ranging from health cost, overhead costs, underground construction costs. And then one thing I wanted to bring to your attention that we'll talk about a little bit is one-time costs related to emergency water supply and reservoir rehabilitation.
Lisa, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
On the HHE work or the WISP, when you say it's 96% complete, but you said we're going to continue to pay for it for some time, how is that funded, or how long do we have to pay for that? So my understanding is that they are still doing the financing of that work, even though they've spent the majority of the funding. They're still first of all doing some spending, and then they're doing a lot of the financing. So when they roll out the bonds to fund the work, then we're going to be paying for those bonds for the next 30 years. And those bonds are still being rolled out. I don't have a specific date for you when they're going to stop rolling out the bonds for the project, but so it's 30 years.
Ongoing.
Yeah. Okay.
So can I jump in? Tom, were you done?
Yep.
So because I have admired the Hetch Hetchy and also going back to the Tuolumne and all of that for so long, we have always maintained, and I would continue to, that this is some of the best water you could find in our country. Could you just comment briefly on that? Do you think we are entitled to those bragging rights, even though it costs us something?
You know, I think it's very high quality water. I think it's something to be proud of. I would open it up to Dean or Jonathan if they want to make any comment about the level of the water related to, as it relates to the country.
Jonathan Abendschein, Assistant Director of Utilities Resource Management. I would just say that the two of the features that I always appreciate about Hetch Hetchy water is, number one, that most of the system is gravity fed, therefore it's very low energy use, and also that the cleanliness of the water is such that it does not, when it's coming down from Hetch Hetchy, it doesn't even require filtration. It's that clean. So it's a very high upcountry water source, tends to be very clean, and yes, some of the cleanest around.
So I know that sometimes in the past, people have complained about the cost, especially because we help maintain the whole system, through San Francisco. But I have always been grateful that we live in a place where we can feel that proud about the water. And as somebody said, it's rather amazing that we use that in our toilets when other parts of the country, can't even hope to have this quality of their water. So I appreciate you making those comments.
Any other questions before we continue?
No, please go ahead. I'm just going to encourage my fellow council members to continue to ask questions as you present. That way we don't have to give better context switching.
Sounds good. Okay. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide. The overall proposal is 0%. There's a couple of reasons for this. Even though the proposal is for a 0% rate increase, there actually is a lot of CIP planned for fiscal year 2020 and 2021. However, a lot of those projects were budgeted for in previous years, and there actually is funding available in reserves for some of the projects. So you can, in the fiscal year 2019 year-end operations reserve balances, those were at the maximum guideline level, with additional funds above that level considered unassigned. So those are the funds that we are measuredly bringing back down to the target level through this financial plan, and using the funds to pay for a lot of the CIP work. The next two bullets I want to bring to your attention. The first is about an annual capital program contribution to the CIP reserve. The water utility has a 2-year main replacement cycle, which means that every other year is a large main replacement project. The next one is coming in 2022. So the annual capital program contribution is to really try to make sure that rates are as stable as possible and also ensure that funds are available for those capital investment projects. So this plan includes an annual capital program contribution at a level amount going from the operations reserve to the CIP reserve in order to fund CIP projects. The second bullet here, or the next bullet below that on the use of the rate stabilization reserve, is that because we know there's a series of steep increases coming down the road from San Francisco Public Utilities Commission beginning in 2023, fiscal year 2023, we want to try to make rates as stable as possible through the enhanced use of the rate stabilization reserve by taking funds that we collect starting in 2022, putting them into that reserve and trying to cushion the blow of those increases in the supply costs starting in 2023. So through the use of these mechanisms, the future projections for 2022 through 2025 are held at around 3 to 4%. This chart shows those 3 to 4% rate increases, and the costs along the top in red. The costs are in the bars, and then the line along the top is the revenue. The committee did have some questions last month, I think it was last month, or when we talked about the preliminary rate increases on salaries and benefits. So I've been working on an updated graphic. We can look at that later if you do have further questions about salaries and benefits. The operations reserve throughout this time period is projected to come back into the guideline range and remain close to the target range throughout the remainder of the forecast period. And then we have some monthly residential bill comparisons. So for the average usage level shown in the red bars, Palo Alto is about 18% above the comparison city average. And this is just the municipal agencies in our comparison group. So I took Cal Water out. So we have, we're showing, that Palo Alto is about 18% above the comparison city average. It does vary depending on the usage level. So you can see in the blue bars, you can see a lower usage level. And in the green bars, you can see a higher usage level. For example, at the lowest usage level, Palo Alto is not the highest in the group. The picture, yes.
Stop there for just a minute. Go back one.
Absolutely. Yes.
So as I look at that you said it's a bill comparison. So is the bill a lot higher because our water cost is a lot higher, or is it a different explanation?
That is a part of it for one or two of these entities, but I think primarily it may be a different reason, and that's something that we're looking into. One of the other reasons other than water supply is the amount of capital investment. Palo Alto does a robust job at capital investment, and it may not be as robust in some of the other cities that we're comparing ourselves to. But we are conducting a deeper dive look into that question in order to be able to report back to you more precisely what some of the reasons are for Palo Alto's higher bills in the water utility specifically, but we're not quite ready to do that yet.
So if I look at this then, and let's just say I take Mountain View in the middle. So that says that we use, or we're paying twice what they are in Mountain View, or am I not misinterpreting that correctly?
No, for example, at a usage level, an average usage level of 8 CCF, which may not be the average in both cities, it's just an average level for comparison. A residential customer in Mountain View is paying approximately $63, whereas in Palo Alto it's close to $80. That's
Yep.
what's shown in the red bars.
Right. So it's not double, but it's considerably more.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. So I'll be interested in knowing long-term what you find out about that, because it probably isn't that we're using that much more water, correct?
It may not be, I mean, and the purpose of this comparison is not to look at the actual average and then compare it, but it could be related to the usage patterns in different customer classes. That's something we need to look at. Yes.
And of these cities, Redwood City is the only one that's 100% Hetch Hetchy, like we are, right? In this comparison.
Hayward also, 100%.
Oh, Hayward's also? Yeah, so I'm really interested in like how Redwood City and Hayward are so much lower. You know, I think Mountain View and Santa Clara use Valley water mixed in with, well, Mountain View gets some Hetch Hetchy, right?
Yes.
So they have different cost structures than we do.
Vice Mayor Du Bois, this is Dean. Also too, in Santa Clara, they also, as you mentioned before, is that they also use a lot of groundwater in Santa Clara. So they're pumping water out of their own ground portion of it. So going back to Councilmember Niss's about the quality of water, is part of it is that Santa Clara is, again, as I mentioned, is that they're using groundwater. So their quality is not as good as well as ours either. But I think your point is well taken, is Redwood City and Hayward we need to take a harder look at.
So Dean, just to stay with that for a minute, and particularly for people who might be listening or even pay attention later, how do you actually compare those two as far as water? Because I am convinced that we have, rather amazing water here in Palo Alto. But when you say the quality is better here, what exactly are you looking at?
So when you look at the, groundwater has a lot of metals in the water where we don't have as much that metal taste to it. So if you were going to go to Santa Clara, you would have a different taste of that purity of water that we have in Palo Alto compared to Santa Clara. Like I said, Hayward and Redwood City is what we're looking at because they also do use Hetch Hetchy. So that's why I think is the biggest comparisons, but just the quality of the taste as well as what we look at from the chemical buildup. Santa Clara is much harsher water. It's harder water than our water that we have in Palo Alto.
Thanks, because I appreciate that. Just as I appreciate our water.
Yes.
John, do you want to say something?
Yeah, just I think one other thing I'd just like to highlight. I talked a little bit about this when we did the preliminary, we reviewed the preliminary rates. But Palo Alto, we have an 80-year main replacement cycle. So we're replacing capital, replacing our water mains at about the rate that they'll last about 80 to 100 years. So we're replacing them at about an 80-year cycle, and there are a lot of water utilities out there that are that struggle to keep up with that level of capital investment. We've done a few benchmarking studies over the years, 2 or 3 of them, and each time one of the main things that comes back is that Palo Alto invests more in its in maintaining its system. I've also gone back and looked into the deeper historical record, and this sort of difference between our rates started to show up right about the time we started accelerating main replacement back in the 1990s. So, and it's been steadily decreasing, the difference between our rates and others, as others have started to invest more in their systems as well. So there will be a lot to dig into, I think, when we do our water benchmarking later in the year. But those are some of the things that we found when we've done this analysis in the past.
Thanks.
Okay, are we ready to go to the next slide, or are there any other questions? Yeah. Okay, so similar comparison for commercial bills. Again, showing Palo Alto being 8 to 11%, so a little bit closer to the average of the neighboring communities, but again, still higher.
Actually, so Lisa, when you guys do the study, so this work's already planned to actually look at like Hayward and Mountain View and to understand why there's a difference between different cities.
Yes.
And so I guess when is that work scheduled to be completed so that we could actually get more analysis on like why there this delta?
It is scheduled for completion later this year.
Oh, okay. Do you have any more precise than that?
I think we have it on November, around November.
November. Okay, so like late this year.
Yes.
So you're saying for next budget cycle, we'll have it essentially.
I certainly hope so.
Okay, great.
That's part of our plan. Okay. So sorry, did someone want to say something? Question? No? Okay, so this is our recommendation that the staff and the UAC recommend that the Finance Committee recommend that the Council adopt a resolution approving. And then I just want to kind of quickly run through these different items to link them to what I was talking about. Adopt the Water Utility Financial Plan, transfer of up to $3 million from the Operations Reserve to the CIP Reserve. This is to help fund the one-time seismic retrofit, seismic rebuild of reservoirs. And then there's a transfer of $5 million from the Operations Reserve to the Rate Stabilization Reserve. This is to put in motion the greater use of the Rate Stabilization Reserve in order to make rates more stable as we face supply cost increases. Then the next bullet is on the capital program contribution from the Operations Reserve to the CIP Reserve. This is the annual contribution to fund all of the CIP work in the water fund out of the CIP reserve, so that you'll be able to see that information in the CIP reserve. Associated with that are some amendments to the water utility reserves management practices. And then associated with the rate stabilization reserve is the request to maintain the balance in the rate stabilization reserve to mitigate those rate increases through fiscal year 2028.
Sorry, Lisa, can you explain that last bullet point? Is approve the maintenance of a balance? Is it a certain level of balance or just any balance?
No, it is a certain specified level in the, basically what's going to happen is in 2022 and 2023, there's going to be funds placed into the rate stabilization reserve. And then as we really need those funds to offset the big series of increases that are coming in from SFPUC 23, 24, 25, then we'll draw down those balances. But we don't want to do anything sudden. We want to make sure that the rates are stable. And so the request is to do it over a longer time period. And so that would go through fiscal year 2028.
So are you saying that it will be entirely drawn down by fiscal year 2028? Is that, I'm just trying to understand what this means. So you're asking to draw it down over a longer period of time?
Yes, the management policy in the financial plan is to make sure that the reserve is drawn down to zero by the end of the planning period. So it should be drawn down to zero by the end of 2025. So we're flagging that as part of this plan, we're requesting a little bit of an extension from that in order to make the rates more stable through a longer period of time.
Got it. Okay. And then I looked at the utility reserves management practices, but they weren't redlined, so it was hard to see what were the changes.
Okay, I apologize about that. It is supposed to be redlined, but the changes were primarily in the CIP reserve section. making the change to the maximum and minimum guideline for that reserve as we utilize it more. The maximum guideline would basically allow us to, it would basically mirror about the average amount of CIP in this time period of the next 5 years.
Okay, and then maybe I could just ask a couple more questions as I'm talking.
Well, one thing I'll just say is, Liz, if you have any questions related to what Tom's asking, I think it would be good to ask them all kind of like all together. So if you have, so feel free, before we leave that thread, if there's some questions you have that kind of align to what we're discussing already, just feel free to jump in.
My next question is kind of aligned too. So you said that the in 2019 we exceeded the reserve and we had unassigned funds. Like where did those funds go? Or
Yes,
they still, yeah.
they are. It's basically considered unassigned. I do have a chart showing the reserve totals if that's something that would help to make it clear. But basically, I'm not in the chart of the operations reserve. It stops showing you those additional funds at the max guideline level.
Can whoever's presenting bring that up for us?
Yes. Let me just make sure I
Right. But those unassigned funds, are those now going to go into a reserve with this motion or not?
Those
Like,
they are in the operations reserve essentially, or they're associated with the operations reserve.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I read in the doc that if we had unassigned funds, the policy is they have to be used in certain ways, right? So is this motion enabling us to use those unassigned funds?
Yes, this plan is to use those unassigned funds, bring the operations reserve back to the back into the guideline range as quickly as possible, and keep it at the target range. Yes.
Great.
Do we need to go? We need to go to that graphic. Let me just try to find it for you momentarily. Forgive me, I'm not very experienced at this.
Oh, no problem.
You know what, Lisa, that's how we feel too.
Okay, so maybe while Lisa's digging that up, do either of you guys have any comments, questions, thoughts?
Great.
Otherwise, we'll let the public.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
If there's nothing from the public, I would move the recommendation to get.
Before you do that, though, I would like to, very low chance that he's going to say something. City Clerk, is there any members of the public that wish to speak?
Members of the public, if any of the attendees would like to speak, please raise your hand or press *9 on your phone. I'll give it a second because we do have one person in there from the phone. Okay, I don't see anybody interested to speak.
Okay, so I'd like to close public comment, and so Councilmember Nis, I think you wanted to make a motion.
Yes, I would move the recommendation that was on the screen a few minutes ago.
Okay, can the City Clerk bring that up for us, please?
I'll second that.
Hold on a second. I think, Lisa, you went through the trouble of bringing up your slide. Do you want to? Sorry, Councilman Nis.
I have the deck up, but yeah, I'll second the motion.
Okay, maybe we'll let Lisa finish off. Lisa, do you want to just talk through the slide quickly, and then we'll let Councilmember Nis to make her comments on the motion?
Yes, so this slide hopefully helps to visualize the unassigned funds a little bit better. You can see they're in the purple bar at the top of the chart. So you can see that they're gradually being drawn down. And at the end of fiscal year 22, this is end of year balances shown in this chart. At the end of fiscal year 2022, there are no more funds in the unassigned category. And the operations reserve at that point is within the guideline range. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so sorry, Councilman Nis, you have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. Do you wish to speak to your motion at all?
Would, but I'd like, there it is. So to begin with, I think that this is well managed. Although I can imagine that someone might say, why is it so much more expensive? So even in moving this, I would reference what Lisa said, which is attempting to find out why the discrepancy between us, particularly and Hayward and Mountain View, which also are Hetch Hetchy. And
Redwood
Lisa,
City.
just to ask, is Hetch Hetchy, is Mountain View totally Hetch Hetchy?
No, Mountain View is not totally Hetch Hetchy, but I believe, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, I believe it's primarily Hetch Hetchy.
It was Redwood City, though, it's 100% was.
Yeah, Redwood City and Hayward.
And Redwood City and Hayward. So, and so Mountain View too, but we won't look at Mountain View. So what I think is, as I said, even in moving this will be that the answers you come back with regarding why that's the case, I think will really help inform us as this goes forward. However, because you haven't been able to do that as yet, I think what we're doing tonight is accepting it, but indicating at the same time that we hope that information will come back in the future.
Okay. Vice Mayor, do you want to speak to your second?
Yeah, again, I think we're managing our reserves well. You know, if we weren't in the middle of the COVID-19, I think I might ask why we're at 0 this year. And then, you know, we are going to have increases in future years. But I think the plan makes sense. I think one thing I've asked the last couple of years, I just wondered if staff looked at it, was any kind of more usage-based fees with kind of higher rates for excessive water usage. You know, is that anything that we were looking at?
Nothing further that I'm aware of, but I would invite Dean or Jonathan if they have any comments on that, anything further.
Vice Mayor Du Bois, this is Dean. No, we have not looked at that. We have not looked at customers that use a higher base than what maybe over the average portion of it, about, you know, looking at another, a different type of rate. But it's something that we could probably take a look at. So we could look into it in the future and see what we could do.
Are you familiar with some of the water districts that are doing this, or they actually have quite a low rate if you stay within a certain water budget? I
Yes.
see you nodding your head. Yeah.
Yes.
I just think, you know, using our rates to kind of forward some of the policies and behavior we want to encourage. You know, I know it's a big change, but I hope it's something we can look at over the years.
Okay, we'll take a look at that.
If I could jump in right there. Dean, did we not do this during the drought?
We basically had drought charges, you know, for usage that was over a certain period, but we never kept it as a rate though, where at a higher rate that we would automatically tier these customers at a higher tier. But we did have rate charges for the drought.
But definitely there was a cost if you went over a certain amount.
That's correct.
Yeah, there's some water districts.
Good.
There's some water districts that do this very usage-based fee structure where they actually they assign kind of a default amount based on an average number of people in a house and an average yard size. And then on an honor system, you can tell them, well, I have more people or less people. But if you stay within your water budget, your rates are quite reasonable. But if you exceed them, then your rates go up a lot. And it's just a way to encourage, you know, water conservation.
Okay, great. So let me before we. Oh, actually, do either of you have any other comments, questions? Otherwise, I have a few questions and comments here. Okay, so so in general, this presentation I thought was actually pretty good. I like the fact that you had comparisons between different cities. I think it's always good to benchmark and kind of look at best practices. I like the fact that you guys are planning to look into more details as to why the rates are higher, because I think myself, along with my fellow council members here, also wonder about that. And so I think that's an important finding to figure out. And maybe, you know, we can understand better why there is. Since this is something that all three of us actually agree on, should we just make that a G then? So that, because I think this is actually good practice for us to have. so it's great that we know that was higher, but to understand why, and I realize that we're not going to get it till maybe next time around, but for the future council next year, they would have the benefit, or the future finance committee in the future would have the benefit of knowing like why, we have the same supplier, so why is our rate a lot higher, right? So I think that would be good to know. So I'm going to ask the maker in a second whether you guys would accept that amendment.
Yes, I want to see how it's worded, but I'm hearing the intent.
Okay.
Do you want to try to word it?
Yeah, so basically, to have details, ask staff to provide the details as to why our rates are higher for cities with the same supplier. It's maybe a better way of wording it, but I'm open to suggestions here.
Liz?
Yes. So I'm looking at it. Just correct. Yes, cities is just, yes, cities. Yes, I think we all agreed on that. There's no question. But my other question, in addition to this, is do we want to indicate to the future finance committee members that we might want to look at a tiered charge for the buyer?
Well, I heard from the vice mayor he's interested. I guess Councilmember Ness, is this something that you're also interested in? I mean, it's your guys' motion, so you guys could certainly.
Yeah, as I said, I remember this from when we were in the drought, that there was a higher cost.
Yeah.
As Dean said, it didn't become a rate. It simply was a charge. So, but if there are other cities that do this, and I think you just said the word, Tom, I would find it interesting for future committees to look at and perhaps consider.
Okay.
So we can try to word that if we're all in agreement. Are we all interested in seeing some kind of tiered rates?
I think in principle it seems to make sense. I think it's complex though, because I mean, our commercial customers, they can use a lot of water, right? I mean, I've been talking to a lot of restaurants just because all of them are going bankrupt right now. So I've been talking to a lot of them about their utility rates, and I mean, I thought my utility rates were high, but when we talk to these commercial customers, their utility bills are like 7, 10, 15x, like they're really, really expensive. And so I guess with a restaurant, you're washing a lot of dishes, so you could use a ton of water. So I know that these restaurant owners are like on the edge right now. So I don't know like if we, maybe on the residential side, maybe it makes more sense, but on the commercial side, we'll push some of these businesses over the edge.
Yeah, I think it's mainly, again, Dean and the water staff probably know best. I've seen it used for residential. I think we're asking this to be looked at for next year too, right? There's no.
Yeah. Well, this is just to study it, right? And
yeah,
I think the principle is right. I just practicality wise, especially
good.
this year, people are suffering big time. So
why don't, in that case, then somewhere in the text it could be reflected that we had a discussion, even though it wasn't part of the motion.
Okay. You had an H somewhere, or there was a. I think the clerk had a.
Chair Tanaka, this is the clerk. I restructured the motion because I didn't want the resolution to include direction to staff. So you'll see A is the resolution with essentially the staff recommendation, and B is the addition.
You want to add a C for the one that we just discussed? This is up to the maker and a seconder, of course.
I think you just persuaded me not to do it, Greg.
Okay, then let's skip it. Let's just skip it then. Okay, let's skip it. Okay.
As Tom mentioned, this is a COVID time of for our city, and putting more pressure now. Let's wait for the next finance committee to take.
Well, Liz, what I was saying was, if we did do it, I think we could ask staff to look into a usage-based rate. But again, it's not to do it the next month or two. This would be for like the next cycle, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's why, if you want to add it as C, I don't object, but I don't see it as critical at the time.
Okay, well, let's move on. Okay, so overall, I think this looks like a good motion. I'll support it. Just some thoughts for us to think about. Like I said earlier, I think construction costs are going to drop precipitously. In fact, there'll probably be some, because the federal government is going to want to restart the economy, and they're probably looking for shovel-ready projects and all that kind of good stuff. So I think one thing I've been thinking about is, well, I don't necessarily think we should be raising our rates on our ratepayers right now, especially given the situation. What's the possibility of doing a bond to get the money so that we could do these projects? And I guess I'm asking a little bit more generally. And so I don't know if there's something maybe Kylie, you might know, or anyone else on the call, but I'm just thinking about that because, when we're trying to do construction during the boom times, construction rates are going up all the time. Now we're going to see just the opposite. And so it's probably a more opportune time, because the problem is we don't necessarily have the money. So could we borrow the money through a bond to finance some of this stuff so that we can do some of these capital improvement projects?
So Chair Tanaka, so we have been looking at, Jonathan Abendschein and myself have been talking to our engineering folks. We're thinking about the same thing that you're doing, is that looking at taking some bonds for our gas and then also for our water and our wastewater side to bond some of those infrastructure costs so that we can also help smooth out some of the rates moving forward. But we need to get the engineering work done ahead of time, and which we're working on now. The advantage that we have on the water side is that, since, as Lisa mentioned, that some of these projects are pushovers from last year into this year. So those projects are ready to go. Where it's a little bit more challenging is in our wastewater and our gas side. But we are looking at what we can get done ahead of time before the end of the year, so that maybe what we can do is we can do some bond financing and for some of the infrastructure moves that we'll have to do.
Okay, great. So it sounds like you guys are already thinking along those lines. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
And just out of curiosity, so I know like a lot of boards and commissions have, because of the whole shutdown, haven't actually been able to meet. But has the UAC been able to see this and the other rates? I know that it's a little bit tricky trying to get all this stuff scheduled. But I was wondering, have they been able to vet some of this stuff?
Yes. So we actually had a UAC meeting on the 15th last week.
Okay.
And then we are also planning on having another one on May the 20th. And so they have seen our rate analysis for all the utilities that will be coming. The other three will be coming to you next month. But yes, they have seen all of this.
No, I don't actually see. Maybe I'm missing it here in the. Was this in the staff report, the recommendation?
I believe so.
Okay, I would think so, but I was doing a search on it, but it's not a big deal. But I assume that they supported this, right?
Let me double check and get you a page number. You're looking in the staff report?
Yeah, I'm just trying to flip through it right now, but it's probably there. I just can't find it.
As Lisa's looking at that, Chair Tanaka, could I add one thing to B, please? If it's possible, is that directing staff to provide the details. Can we add in there looking at this for next year?
Oh yeah, I think Lisa said you guys are gonna do it for November, so it's a future finance committee, right?
Okay, so it says direct staff to provide details as why Palo Alto's rates are higher at the future finance. Thank you.
Let's say the 2021, yes. Or I guess the
For next year's.
For next year. Yeah.
Right, got it. Okay, yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So to your earlier question, the recommendation is in the first page of the staff report. for water.
The first page 1.
I believe so, yes.
It says the UAC reviewed this on page 1. I just see executive summary. Am I looking at a different page 1?
You are right.
Chair
I'm
Tanaka,
going to
this
look
is
up
the, this is
timeline.
the clerk. I see some information about the UAC review on the bottom of page 3, the last paragraph.
Oh, page 3. Okay. Oh, I see. Here it is. Okay, perfect. Okay, perfect. Okay, I think we're ready to vote unless my colleagues have more comments.
Yep.
Okay. Actually, and sorry, my comment was actually for the next item. There's the next one and I couldn't find it. So sorry, I was looking at the wrong report. I had the wrong screen on my monitor here. Okay. Councilmember Miss, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councilmember or Vice Mayor Du Bois?
Yes.
Okay, and I vote yes. Okay, this motion passes unanimously. Let's go to the next item. Item 3. Does staff have a presentation that you'd like to review with us?
Yes, we do. Lisa, I think she's just switching right now, but Lisa Blair will be giving the presentation as well.
Sorry about that. I lost my connection for a moment. I'm just opening the slide presentation right now. Okay, can you see the wastewater collection utility
Yeah.
presentation? Okay, wonderful. Okay, so in the wastewater utility, we're proposing 0% as well, although the reasons are somewhat different. We are currently working on a cost of service study and working to finalize that. However, with the COVID-19 situation, in emergency and the uncertainty that comes with that, we really want to take a little bit more time to give that study the attention that it deserves. There may be some cost shifts across customer classes as a result of that study. And so we really want to study it closely. We may come back to you later this year with that information if we know it and can make a recommendation on implementing any results from that study. So if we go with this proposal of 0%, which is our recommendation tonight, that means a slightly higher increase in the subsequent 4 years than we brought to you in the preliminary rate projection. So we're looking at 5% increases in the following 4 years. And again, as in the water utility, the numbers that I'm showing you do not include COVID-19 impacts. So we, if you want a little bit more information that we provided to the UAC, we can go to that. Yes.
One question on the previous slide.
Yes.
I apologize, I couldn't jump in fast enough.
Oh.
When you say future projections following 4 years, you don't mean 5% every year.
I do. I mean 5% each year, 2022, 23, 24, and 25.
Will each have a 5% per year increase
Yes.
for a total of 20%.
Right.
Okay, I hope you'll explain that as you go along. That sounds rather dramatic.
So the costs for the wastewater utility are split into collection costs and treatment costs. About 43% is collection and 57% treatment costs. And there are 5 partners to the Regional Water Quality Control Plant. And the Palo Alto Utilities Department manages the collection system and the Public Works manages the Regional Water Quality Control Plant.
Lisa, quick question.
Yes.
So when we set the rates, do we set the rates for everyone or just ourselves?
So this discussion is just about the wastewater utility, the amounts that Palo Alto pays. So this is taking as an input the treatment costs from the regional water quality control plant,
That's what I thought. I just want to make sure.
setting the rates just for the Palo Alto residents and businesses.
Sure.
On the treatment cost side, I do just want to give you a little bit of a taste of the type of drivers coming on the treatment cost side. The Regional Water Quality Control Plant completed their long-range facilities plan in 2012. And this is a list that they provided of some of the cost drivers that are coming up in the next few years, just for your reference. And then on the wastewater collection system side, we have cost drivers from operations and capital costs. The wastewater utility also has a 2-year cycle for main replacement, with the large project envisioned in 2022. And this is a view of the median monthly residential bill compared with some neighboring communities. And Palo Alto is about 26% below this comparison city average. The wastewater treatment plant did provide a graphic that they use showing Palo Alto compared with neighbors. So I have a copy of that if you are interested in seeing it. And then on the commercial side, commercial rates are commercial rates are a little bit higher than the comparison city average for commercial customers, about 14% showed on this slide, whereas restaurant is slightly below the comparison city average.
So Lisa, is it what's happening is commercial is basically offsetting our lower residential rates? Is that basically how to explain this?
I suppose it does contribute to it a little bit, but the amount of revenue coming from residential is a lot higher. There's a lot more residential customers.
Okay.
So I don't have an answer for exactly how much of it explains. The wastewater projections, you can see the cost increases in the 5% that you were asking about. A lot of the increases are coming both from the capital cost increases on the treatment side, and also the increases in on the collection side. Even with those increases, we took a look at the operations reserve, and it does stay within the guideline range, but it is drawn down throughout the time period. However, it comes back up a little bit by 2025. And our overall recommendation is to not make any changes to wastewater rates as of July 1st. That's all I really have, but we'd be happy to try to answer any questions you have.
Okay. Vice Mayor or Councilmember Nis, do either of you guys have questions, comments, thoughts on this? Oh, actually, maybe since you finished the presentation, let me first go to the public. City Clerk, any members of the public that wish to speak on this item?
No, there are no people wishing to speak.
Okay, so let's close the comments then, and let's go back to the council members. Do either of you have questions, comments, motion, thoughts on this?
I actually don't have any questions on it, and I'd be glad to vote for this recommendation whenever it's appropriate.
Okay. Vice Mayor, you're muted right now.
Yes, thank you. So a couple of questions. So it looks like the reserve gets down to be pretty low in the future years there. Can you talk about the reserve?
Yes, and I want to also mention that this general picture of the financial forecast for the wastewater utility, I didn't really highlight the CIP reserve, but there is also funds in the CIP reserve. This plan envisions that we use the CIP reserve the same way that we do in the water utility. So it may be helpful to know that, and I can show you the CIP reserve if you would like to see the funds available in there. But with the two of those together, there are should be sufficient funds through this plan.
But this is different than the water where we were at the max level, right?
Oh, yes, this is different.
So, I mean, could you show a couple of those slides on the reserve?
Sure. Let me jump to that.
While you're looking for that, I looked in the backup slides as well, and I saw that our regional wastewater partner cities all charge quite a bit more than we do. Do you guys know why that is?
Vice Mayor, I think I think Lisa actually answered that question earlier. Well, maybe answered it because we have commercial rates a lot higher and then the residential a lot lower. So it might.
This was comparison to the other cities.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So the residential is a lot lower, but the commercial is a lot higher. So that might explain some of it. But anyways, Lisa is back now, so she could explain.
Or Phil could. It looked like Phil was getting ready to.
So did you have an answer?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I really caught your question fully, but your question is about some other cities being.
That's okay. Let's go to this question. Yeah, I thought maybe somebody else could answer while you're pulling this up.
Okay, so I just wanted to give you a view of the CIP reserve through the same time period to show you that this is our best picture of the financial information going forward that we have, but it, so in the CIP reserve, you can see the fluctuating amount here, beginning in 2021 at 3 million, and then it goes down to the minimum of the proposed minimum of that reserve of 1 million. So even if the operations reserve goes down close to the minimum guideline level, I think from the other chart, I think that was in 2024 that it was low, there are still funds available in the CIP reserve. So I think the two of them together show the picture that this is fairly reasonable forecast.
Okay. Did you guys consider like a cost of living increase? Like was this suggestion of no raise at all kind of pre-COVID or post-COVID?
I mean, I think we were proposing a rate increase, and then with this COVID-19 situation, we are bringing it to a zero for now, while we continue to work on the cost of service study and evaluate all the final information in the financial plan and cost of service study. I would invite Jonathan or Dean, if you have any further comments in response to that question, feel free to jump in with the answer.
Yeah, I think we were in the process of trying to wrap up the last, put the finishing touches on our cost of service study, and when we started working on pandemic response and trying to assess the economic impacts, and especially the additional burden that it put on attorneys' office staff who do a lot of review around these cost of service studies, we felt that it was better to delay that cost of service study by a few months. Once we have that cost of service study completed, it's possible we might implement a small cost of living increase to bring down the rate increases in future years, and that we would come back to you later in the year to do that.
Do you expect that cost of service study to shift, to like raise residential rates, kind of shift the balance?
I think it's too early for us to share those results until they've really been closely internally vetted.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just concerned about kind of the reserves. The other reserve gets straight down to the lower limit, and this one gets close to. And like you said, those 4 years of 5% raises is pretty steep. So even if we did a CPI level raise this year, it might smooth it out a little bit more. So you're saying that when that study comes, you may do like a mid-year change?
Yeah, I think those concerns are also on our mind as well. So in addition to the fact that there may be additional impacts because of the economic impacts of shelter in place as well. So so both of those things are on our mind, and I think we'll be looking at that.
Okay. And then I think it was a couple slides up from this was the comparison to other cities. Like slide 20 maybe. I don't know, Lisa, could you go up a couple slides to Yeah, slide 20. Yeah, so I was just curious about this slide where, the other member agencies are priced quite a bit higher than us.
Sorry, I lost my sound there for a moment. Yes, this is the slide provided by the Regional Water Quality Control Plant that they use, and it does compare Palo Alto to some of the other neighboring cities and districts. And I just added a little red star on the partners of the Regional Water Quality Control Plant for City of Palo Alto, Mountain View, and Los Altos Hills.
Yeah, so do you know why they're higher? I mean, this is a cost recovery kind of enterprise, right?
Right. This is Phil Boble. I could chime in here and say that the 3 starred ones, just 2 of our partners are on here, and 2 are not, I guess. Actually, 3 are not. There's a counting Palo Alto. There's 6 partner cities, but the 2 that are on here are Mountain View. So to mention a few things about Mountain View, they have spent a fair amount more than we have on relining their sewer lines in the north of what they call the north of Bayshore area, basically underneath the old Baylands, where salt water creeps in. And both we and they have wanted them to work on salt water intrusion problems to increase the quality of our irrigation water. So that's one thing they've spent more money on. Recognize that these rates for Palo Alto and all these people include both treatment and collection system. So for Mountain View, it includes their payment to us for the treatment plant costs and then their own collection system. So that's one example for Mountain View as to what has driven that up. For the other one on here, Los Altos Hills, all these communities like Los Altos Hills and Hillsborough, they have substantially higher rates than other people. In fact, there's Hillsborough on the right-hand edge of this graph looking so horrible. And that's because in a community like that, first, it's in the hills, it's harder to build and maintain collection systems. And then secondly, there's no industrial support at all, as you know, or not even industrial commercial. There's no, except for Foothill College, there's nothing you could call a commercial business in Los Altos Hills. So they don't have that. That really is probably the main thing about those kind of communities. But then secondly, they're either 1 acre lots or they're much bigger lots. So they have fewer connections per area. And the real factor is that they have much longer, much bigger collection systems to collect from the same number of houses. So that's just a few insights about those differences. But while that graph is up there, I have to say that we're very proud of the fact that Palo Alto is not only lower than those 2, but lower than all those other people on there, which go to various sewage treatment plants on the peninsula. I think they're all peninsula, well, peninsula and the other side of the coast, like Pacifica. So we are very proud of that, but you didn't ask about them, so I won't chime in now, but didn't want to lose the opportunity to point that out.
I think you just did.
Oh, okay.
When you said like the other members of our plan, I mean, we split cost equally, right? Do we actually get a benefit from running the plant for the other cities?
Sorry, Tom, I couldn't hear that. Say it again. Do we actually what?
Well, I mean, you were saying, as you talked about the people that are partners and their rates are higher. You said that they're paying us, but we pay our own costs as well. Like, so are we actually getting a benefit of running the plant for the other partners?
Well, I think we all get the benefit of the fact that we're bigger. If they all tried to run their own plants, which some of them did you wouldn't get that benefit of having a larger plant.
Right.
So yes, there is that benefit of us collectively doing something. It's cheaper than each of us doing something. Not sure if that's what you were getting at or not.
No, I mean, we're not like making a profit off of them, and that's why our rate is lower. Than
Oh,
theirs.
no. It's structured very carefully so that they pay costs associated. The costs they pay, there's a formula, and it relates to, it's defined by their flow and their strength of the sewage.
Actually, Vice Mayor, let me jump in for a minute because it's related to what you just said.
I think yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. So, actually, I think the Vice Mayor actually has a good thread of thought here, which is, it is our land, right, that this plant sits on, correct?
Yes.
And so, we're using this land, Palo property prices are still relatively high. At least I still hope so. We'll find out soon. But I mean, do we not get rent? Do we charge the plant rent? Like, do we get rent on that property, like full market rent, to compensate ourselves for
Let
this?
me explain briefly how that works. So this issue was recognized by our forefathers when this was set up in the late 1960s, when the agreements were set up on how this was going to be financed and run. And they contributed, these partners contributed to the value of the land at that point in time. And you could look back at those numbers now and say, wow, they got a real bargain. But at the time, 5 decades ago, somebody before us made the decision as to what that land value was, and they paid Palo Alto their portion of that land value. So that land value has been taken into account in those original agreements.
Okay,
and they do not pay rent.
Okay, no problem, no problem. Okay, I understand. It was more of just a thought from what the Vice Mayor was saying. Okay, so I have a few thoughts on this. Actually, I think Lisa, can you go up to the slide that you had for the commercial rates comparison against other cities?
While she finds that, could I mention that, Phil, that background was really helpful. It really helps put it in context when you know what happened way back when and how it affects what's going on now.
Yep, definitely. Thank you. I know the virus asked a question, and I think Phil actually talked a little bit about this. Some communities don't have much commercial, but just something I do hear the commercial customers complain to me about, like, how come they have to pay so much more than residential? But I think that's how we're set up right now, and that's how we offset, also lower residential rates. So I think that was a good comment, Phil, on this. And I like how you guys had the comparisons against other cities. I think this is really insightful. So I want to encourage you guys to keep it up. Sorry, and this was item which I was going to ask if the UAC actually looked at it, and because I didn't see their comments in the staff report. Again, I might have missed it again, but I had it on my screen as a mistake instead of the other one when I did a search. Did they actually look at this as well?
That is a good question. And yes, they did, but it was at the meeting last week on the 15th of April. Okay. And they did see this similar information and they were supportive of this 0% approach.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, great. That's all I needed here. And then let's see. I think we have a current lawsuit against us on the transferring of utility funds to our general fund. What happens if we can't do that anymore? What happens to, like, because then suddenly the utility fund's going to have a lot more money, right? Because we're not transferring that to the general fund. So how would this? I don't know. Do you guys have a feel about, like, when all the rates go down, or what would the situation be if that happened?
Council member, I'm not sure that we're really prepared to speak to anything related to any outstanding legal action against the city. I mean, I'll defer to the administrative services director and the city manager for any additional discussion at this point.
That's right, John, and Councilmember Tanaka. This is not something that's agendized for tonight.
Okay, that's fine.
And
Can you just tell me how much is it? Like how much is a transfer right now?
I would actually have to look that up, first of all, and second of all, has nothing to do with the rates that are being reviewed today.
Right.
Okay, well, I guess the reason why it's related is because the vice mayor is concerned about some of the reserves going down. And so I was just thinking about if those transfers aren't happening, you know, we would have a lot more money in this fund.
Yeah, I think it's not agendized for tonight.
Okay, well, let's move on then. And then how does staff figure out, like, how do we figure out how much we should invest in infrastructure? Like, how do we know like enough is enough and not too much?
Well, I could speak to the treatment plant part of it, if that's what you had in mind.
Well, I guess not the details, but just generally, because I think that's something which I kind of wonder about is, I mean, there's like not doing enough and things suddenly just skyrocket, right? If you defer maintenance too much, the cost just skyrocket, right? So there's that issue. And then if you do too much, sometimes you're incurring unnecessary costs. And I know it's a delicate balance. So I'm curious to know like how you guys figure that out.
So in terms of what's included in the financial plans, we're trying to base that upon the budget information.
Okay, so basically we're now driven just mainly by how much money we have versus. Sorry.
May I maybe speak to this? So we do studies periodically. You're looking at we do studies to look both at the capacity of the system and any changes that need to be made to accommodate growth. We also do a continuous condition assessment of the system. So we do continuous condition assessment of the system, and periodically we do studies to determine what our rate of replacement needs to be. And the methodology for assessing that is different for each of the utilities. So we don't have engineering with us tonight, but that's something we could come back and have engineering speak to in detail if that's something that the committee wanted to look at. But essentially, it's done based on engineering studies every 5 to 7 years.
I think that might be important, not just for, you know, this particular rate change or non-change, but you know, I think with the manager projecting revenue to drop considerably, and just the whole economy, I do wonder like whether we have to make more kind of fine-grained choices on things. Okay, and last question here before I think one of us should make a motion is I assume that we could move money between different reserves fairly easily, or is there some sort of legal restriction where you can't do that? Like, for instance, the CIP and the rate reserves. I assume that could be moved pretty easily, but how about from like, let's say from gas to electric? I don't know if is there more of a like a firewall between those funds? Because I know we're supposed to do rate recovery, but I wonder like between the utilities, how much fungibility is there?
There's not fungibility between the utilities. The utilities are governed by state laws and our ratepayer money, which has significant restrictions around it.
Okay, so basically between like gas and electric can happen. How about within, let's say, wastewater itself? Can that between capital and the rate stabilization, is that fungible?
So within
go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, no, within the wastewater utility, the management guidelines for the reserves governs which reserves transfers can be made, and most of them require council approval. So that's why we're including that in our those transfers in our request.
Okay, so with council approval, we could do it. Okay, that sounds perfect. I'm looking to my fellow committee members. Does one of you guys want to make a motion? Or are there more questions or discussion you guys want to have?
I have I'm fine.
I'll
Okay.
move the staff motion.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. You guys, you want to speak to your motions at all, or should we just take a vote?
No, I just want to see that it's up there.
Okay.
Ooh. No, the only comment I would make to this is that, which I think we've been making on a constant basis as we've gone along, is that when there are no changes this year, I think that's a real plus as a message to the general public. This is this is a year that's hard to define. I don't know about the rest of you, but it's hard to even think about where might we be on July 1st, for example. You know, are we still going to be here? Are we still going to be in our houses? Are we still going to be interacting on Zoom, or might we actually get to see each other in person again? So that's a fairly long way of saying, yes, I'm making the motion and supporting it, but I am pleased that we're not making those changes this year.
Okay. Vice Mayor, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, and I also vote yes, and I think Councilmember Niss is right. A lot of people are hurting. This is, well, not a lot of money, you know, we're talking about it, every little bit helps. So it shows that we as a city understand people's pain, economic pain that they're going through, and so this seems like the right thing for us to be doing. So appreciate staff's recommendation on this. So we are done with item 3. So we're moving on now to future meetings and agendas. I got this email from Ed just before the meeting, which, you know, I think in general we usually have a meeting after this to talk about it, but wanted to see from my fellow committee members if there's any. Actually, I think Vice Mayor, you weren't. I think the mayor was substituted for you, right? So you weren't on the last meeting.
All right, it's my first meeting.
Yeah. So you know, one of the discussions that we're going to have is on pensions, and I invited a couple professors from Stanford on this topic who will be joining us. They've both committed, and but just want to see if my fellow committee members have ideas or suggestions for agendas, you know, in the future that you guys want to see addressed. We could certainly put that on a docket, and then I'll work with the city manager and Kylie on trying to figure out how to make this stuff happen. So do either one of you have suggestions or thoughts on future agenda topics?
I personally, I want to get through the budget and then
Yes, I think I
come
do.
out after that.
Okay. Okay, I think we are. Oh, sorry. We're
Chair, sorry for interrupting. One second. Just one clarification. There's not a pension item scheduled for May. The item that's scheduled is for retiree healthcare. It's our OPEB accounts, other post-employment benefits. So I just wanted to clarify to make sure that we were clear on what was going to be considered.
Oh, well, last time we talked, in fact, I sent the invites out based on our conversation. I copied you guys, but we could talk about this after the meeting to figure out what's going on. But okay, I think for my fellow, I know it's actually we're finishing ahead of schedule, so that's good. It sounds, sorry, go ahead.
So Kylie, the discussion about pension funding, is that going to council?
That's correct. So the last action that was taken by the Finance Committee was admittedly at the end of last calendar year and there were guidelines that were approved for the pension funding policy. And so staff is to return to the full council with that draft policy. And we're just trying to time it correctly, to be honest, with frankly staff work given the COVID situation and then also the budget implications that are going to be taken up by the council May 11th.
Makes sense.
Okay. Well, I want to call this meeting to adjourn the meeting. And for Kylie and Ed, I was told there's no breakout rooms on this thing, so I'll send you guys a Zoom invite based off of Ed's thread. Okay, thank you so much for everyone's work on this. Have a good night. Bye.
Good night.